All right, welcome everyone to our August meeting for the Inland SoCal Housing Collective. We have a great agenda. We have some special presentations, some special people here, as Curt said. So we have the Office of Congressman Aguilar, who's here to provide local and state and federal updates. Also a special presentation from Lift to Rise. In addition, we have a CRA and some special reports from the Federal Reserve from Jessica Coria, and a few announcements. There.
Sounds like a very special day to me.
Yeah, it's a packed agenda. So just real quick, the Inland SoCal Housing Collective is collaborating, working with IREN, the Inland Regional Energy Network, as they are releasing and providing updates for just energy efficiency, especially in terms of development, housing, as well as commercial and others. They're partnering with SBCOG and WRCOG and to do some training for our local area for the public sector as well as the private, and they're looking to find some information and feedback on how they can do that in a way that can be efficient in terms of time and scheduling and how trainings roll out. So if you are a part of that private or public sector, I'd appreciate your feedback on this. We're trying to get some surveys back, some information to support the work that they're doing in our region. No, sorry. Next, we have our Bank On workshop that'll be happening next Tuesday. It's a mini workshop on the coalition. If there's people that are interested, you want to know real quick, it's 30 minutes of your time. Any staff member, colleagues, anything like that, please feel free to register. This is also in our newsletter that went on Monday. And you can use the QR code here, or I'll drop the link in for registration if you want to send it to someone, or you yourself want to participate. Excuse me, sorry, I'm just admitting a few people who came into the meeting. All right, and back to the IREN real quick. We have some trainings that are coming up that are already rolling out. If you yourself are interested in that, I have them listed here for you to easily register. They're also in our newsletter if anyone wants to follow up on that. And we have our Bank On Coalition matrix, our coalition matrix and website if you want to follow up and learn more about what our coalition does locally. So these slides seem a little mixed up. They were linked better. Lastly, we have our HPLA survey. So I'm just asking if any of you participate in HPLA, take a minute, take the survey. We want our collecting feedback on what people are doing in our region, if they're following up on any policy and such. So. Alrighty, so then now we'll transition to our main part of the meeting. As you guys saw in the beginning in our agenda, we have a packed agenda. We have 3 speakers, and normally we have 2. So get ready, hold on. We're going to try and condense this information so that way we can get it out in the time span of this meeting. So first off, we do have the Office of Congressman Aguilar. We have Curt Lewis and Elise Sugarman here. Elise is the legislative director, and Curt is the grants director. And they're here today to give us an update on what's happening on both sides of that. So welcome, Elise. Welcome, Curt.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us. I can start. Like Melanie mentioned, I'm Elise. I'm Congressman Aguilar's legislative director. I am based in our DC office, but I'm originally from Southern California. I miss it a lot. I love coming back and visiting the district. So California is absolutely the best. I figured I'd give like a bigger DC overview. What's going on in DC right now? I mean, it's pretty quiet generally right now, but as we head back into September, it'll be a little busier. So just to start, you may have heard about the Biden administration's Invest in America agenda, and I'll drop actually a link of what they've most recently been doing in the housing space. Let me make sure to drop that in here. just so everyone can see it. But this is some of the stuff they're working on to lower housing costs and boost supply. I know I was talking, Curt and I were talking with Melanie yesterday about the pathways to removing obstacles to housing program, the Pro Housing program. I know Curt is our grants expert, so he can talk a little bit more about it, but applications are closing for that on October 30th. And it's a program that can provide $10 million per grant to states, counties, cities, and others like metropolitan planning organizations and multi-jurisdictional entities to address the demand for affordable housing. So it's definitely a really great program. The Economic Development Administration is working to prioritize efficient land use when it's determining its grants. I know Curt's going to talk too about the Reconnecting Communities and Neighborhoods program under the Department of Transportation, but that fact sheet that I dropped in gives you a few of those already, and happy to talk more about that too. The congressman really cares a lot about housing issues, especially since it is a big priority in California broadly, but especially in Southern California. He's tried to prioritize access to Federal Housing Administration loans, FHA loans. He's also worked on introducing, he hasn't introduced it yet, but last Congress he introduced a Affordable Housing Resident Services Act to create a 5-year demonstration grant program at HUD to provide funding each year to owners of affordable housing properties to offer supportive services for their residents. We actually last year in the appropriations process, the budget process, got a small little demonstration program created under the Health and Human Services Agency. I know the deadline is to apply for funding for this program is going to be on this Friday, so it's pretty soon. But basically, this would be a program for affordable housing properties to provide supportive services. I'll drop that grant information, the chat as well. But speaking generally, he's on the Appropriations Committee in the House of Representatives. So that's when we're ever talking about the budget. He's the one that's helping to allocate funding for different programs, and he sits on the Transportation and Housing Appropriations Subcommittee. So I can talk to you a little bit about what the House is working on this year. It's a little more challenging since Democrats are in the minority in the House. So our funding levels for housing aren't as high as we'd like, but I can definitely tell you where they're at the moment on the House side. So there's the bill, the Transportation Housing Bill provides about $90 billion in non-emergency discretionary spending for transportation and housing. So that's about $712 million below last year's levels. And for HUD, there's about $68.2 billion. And unfortunately, zeroes out programs like the Choice Neighborhoods Initiative or the Yes in My Backyard program, but it does provide about $500 million for Home Investment Partnership Program, which is unfortunately $1 billion less than the fiscal year 2023 level. We're really hoping the Senate side is working pretty hard to increase the housing levels. So we're hoping to see that when we eventually go to compromise on these two bills, that we can bring these numbers up since they're a lot lower than we would like to see. There's $3.3 million in that bill for community development block grants, $3.729 billion for homeless assistance grants. So that's a little bit about what's in that bill. And then something that we also have been able to work on in the last several years is community project funding. I'm sure you've seen that. We get the opportunity, communities, groups in our district can apply to get what used to be called an earmark. Now they're called community project funding, getting direct funding for their projects. So a big account that you guys should definitely keep an eye on. And while we're not in that cycle, it's just something to keep in mind. We usually have applications around that for it's usually around March, sometimes April, just depends. But a big account to keep an eye on is the Economic Development Initiative under HUD. So some projects that can get funding are like public or nonprofit housing rehab, housing development financing, residential conversions, neighborhood revitalization. So those are just some examples. Some groups are eligible: state, local, or tribal governments, nonprofits, but for-profits are not eligible. So that's just something to keep in mind. But I talked a lot. I'll turn it over to Curt, and then happy to answer any questions too about anything I talked about, or just anything generally about what's going on in DC and what the congressman's working on.
Very good. Thanks, Elise. I think that was some very good information. I want to just piggyback on what you said about the community project funding. It doesn't come out for a few more months, but this is the time that you start thinking about what's eligible and what kind of projects you would bring to the table, and just to gather information to make sure that you're in the right area, because it is one of the few programs that still has local decision making. We're seeing that. Well, we see that quite a bit with some of the other programs, such as the ARP money, the CARES, the COVID money. They're all funding opportunities that allow local decision making. If you aren't in touch with the city or county administrators about these programs and the opportunities they provide, you probably should be, because it's a lot of money there, and they have the ability to make funding decisions locally. And so that's really going to be important. There's also the home, the CDBG stuff, and it's all going good. I'm saying that now because one of the things I'm sensing is that the pendulum is getting ready to swing. We've had a really good run ever since the COVID. I guess after COVID, during COVID and after COVID and the pandemic, all this money became local driven. The local decision makers had a huge role in determining what was going on in their communities. Before that, it wasn't that way. You were competing with 800,000, 18,000 people who were applying for the same grant and assistance. I think it's going back there. So one of the things that's going to be really important going forward is making sure that you prepare competitive grants. Now, you're going to have to compete again. And not only are you going to have to compete with people in your immediate neighborhoods and cities, but all over the country and nationwide. So it makes it a little more difficult. And when I spoke with federal officials, they tell us three things why grants don't get funded all the time. I know everybody in this room is pretty good at doing grants, but I'm going to mention these three just in case you know somebody who needs to know what the federal folks are saying. And the first thing they're saying is that our applications seem to be not that compelling. That's the one thing they look for. Is it compelling? And is there anything unique about what you are suggesting to do? Then they want to know about your narrative. Is your narrative consistent with your budget? Because they really do go through. They have teams that go through these things. And then the other thing is, is it complete and is it on time? And those are the three things that we hear from all federal agencies, that these are the common denominators of people who don't get funded. Now, they have some other things. They say the people on the other end will say that the application period was just too short, or my consultant didn't do a good job, or I just didn't have time to get it in. So, be aware. That's what they're saying. But that stuff doesn't matter. It's what these federal agencies are going to say that you need to look up to. And so, and I think that's where our office can come in. We try to provide services that will help agencies. And we do that in a number of ways. We provide NOFAs for your information, so you'll have an idea of what's going on. We can help prepare letters of support for you. If you are submitting an application, give us a week's notice, and we will see if we can get a letter to support your application. Doesn't mean it's going to get special treatment, but at least it tells the agencies that you've been in touch with your congressional people, and that your congressman or staff is aware of what you're doing and what you're proposing here. And that really goes a long ways. We can also do one-on-one grant search with you. We'll sit down and we'll talk one-on-one about what your goals are and what you've done in the past, what you're going to do. and we'll see if we can match you with some really good opportunities here. And then, of course, we can help you with federal assistance if you have issues with grant agencies. That happens from time to time. You may come into a compliance issue. You may have a misunderstanding about you thought you were supposed to do this, and they thought you were going to do that. So we get in a lot of those times. And Elise is very good at negotiating with agencies to help with that. So we ask you that if there's any issues, please look at us for that. And if your application gets over the first hurdle of the completeness, if it gets over the hurdle of being content-wise acceptable to the agencies, and if it gets to the secretary's desk or his group for funding, then we generally find out about it, and we'll see if we can get the congressman to sit down and talk to whoever the funding agency is. He likes to do that, but only when the application is complete and it gets to that level. And obviously, it doesn't mean that you're going to be funded if he makes a call, but again, it helps. And anything that works in your favor is going to be helpful for you to getting funds. I just mentioned let me mention a couple of grant search organizations or resources for you that you may want to look into. Obviously, grants.gov. Everybody knows how to search for grants on grants.gov. There's also federalconnect.net. It's a good source to use. The assistancelistings.org is something you want to look at. I think they're back. There used to be the old beta thing. You need to look at that and determine what you're looking for. And if you're looking for data is really important in making your proposals. And somewhere in your proposal, in your narrative, you want to use as much data as you possibly can. And usspending.gov is a good source for that. And then there's a group, the local group, the Community Collective, Susan Gonzalez's group. What's it called? I can't think of the name of it. It won't come to my head. But anyway,
Susan Gomez.
Yeah.
There you go.
Susan Gomez's group. They have a good search engine that they will sit down with you and just search everything. Anytime you call them, you sign up for their service. Not only will they help you with capacity building, but they will help you do search. So that's a good something you want to look at. I also had a chance to look to see if there were any current or NOFAs that you should be aware of right now for housing. A couple comes to mind. One of them was the Youth Demonstration Program at HUD, then the Homeless Veterans Reintegration Program at the Department of Labor. There's a Transitional Living for Homeless Youth. There's the Continuum of Care. There's a Manufactured Home for Principal, if you're using your home as your principal dwelling. There's a mortgage insurance for housing in declining areas. They're all things that you may be interested in. I didn't mention what we had done over the last few years. Congressman Aguilar has supported through the community project funding. In 23, we funded over $4 million in housing support. And then in 24, the budget, at least where's the money for 24? Is it still somewhere in the
are you asking about the current
CFP money? It hasn't been.
Yeah, so we're currently in the appropriation cycle, so we secured funding in the House bills, but then it takes time in terms of like the Senate does their own thing, and then we have to compromise, and usually we don't get finalized numbers until close to December.
Okay,
it's a process.
So if you got funding from 24, the money is still there, and it just takes a while to draw it down and to get through those loops. I'm sure you're probably talking with some of the agencies now to do that. But anyway, in 24, we had something like $9 million out of the $30 million that he received was allocated for housing and housing support. So as Elise says, Congressman is very concerned about housing. We recognize that it's really important. And he wants to make sure that housing can be a reality for everybody. We need partners. We need you to partner with us. Let us know what you're doing, and we'll let you know what we're doing, and we'll see how we can make the best out of whatever comes down the road. Thank you. Any questions?
I have a question. Thanks both of you for your reports. Do you have any sense of the departments that will be accepting applications in the next round of community benefit funding? I know last year it got restricted away from human services to more infrastructure, transportation.
Yeah, so I assume next year, in the next cycle, it's gonna be similar, given that it's a Republican majority. But the Senate, they do it a little differently. I know that the Senate allowed a lot of human services opportunities, so you should definitely look to Senator Feinstein and Senator Padilla's like opportunities when those come up next spring. And we're also happy to, since it got so limited on the House side, we're able to provide like letters of support for you guys too, to show that, because we would ideally like to submit those, but they limited it a lot on the House side, which is tough.
Thanks for that information.
Yeah, of course.
I had a similar question about the community project funding. Curt mentioned that the congressman supported 4 million in housing supports. Just wondering if you have any more detail on like what kind of projects those were.
What do we do for? Yeah, that was in 23, we did 4 million for the which one was that in 23? Let me grab it.
I'm gonna also drop a link into the chat of we had to put together like all of the community project funding we've submit in the past years. So I included that in the chat. You can see
Good.
these aren't necessarily what they were funded at. Let me see if I could pull up our press release too on what the actual funding levels were in the past years. So just give me a second. But that's where we post all of our community project funding information too.
I've got it written down here.
Great.
23 and 24. One of the biggest ones that we had during that time was the Fontana program. They were doing a home programs for disabled, severely disabled, chronically disabled. I think it was going to be a 3-tier program, and they were doing 3 phases of it, and we were funding $4 million of what they were doing in that respect. The other ones for 24, 24 ones. Did you have that still? For 24. Let me grab that for you.
I'm dropping into the chat what last year's funding was, and let me find the one from the year before.
Okay. Oh, here's the other. For 24, we had the Blessing Housing Development, the Housing Authority for 5 million, and the NPHS for 2 million.
Okay. So it's like it's mostly been sort of like construction, like related to actual construction as opposed to services.
Yeah, unfortunately this year they really restricted it, that it is mainly for construction and we can't do as many services. I don't think we could do any services.
Yeah.
But you should definitely take a look too at what is available on the Senate side. Senator Padilla and Senator Feinstein may be able to submit for services, but unfortunately we're very limited.
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and that's why the emphasis is going to shift back to some of the applications themselves, the grant.gov, and to keeping in touch with us so we can let you know when we see projects that will provide services. So we get lists, we do a lot of searching, and be happy to notify you whenever there's something that does come through. So some of your information we'll add you to our list, and whenever it's something that you're interested in, we'll let you know.
Well, thank you so much. I was going to say, I think we're going to get transition actually over to Ian, who was asking the question to Lift to Rise. But Elise and Curt, thank you so much for providing an update. And if you guys want to drop your information in the chat, and anyone wants to follow up, that might be a great opportunity for anyone with any special questions in regards to community fund grants or that will be coming up or what's coming out. And I know we haven't heard, but any just follow-up details. They can contact you directly. And Elise, thanks for dropping all that info in here too as a resource, so people can grab it if they need to. Again, thank you so much. We're going to transition over to our second presentation of 3 today. I asked Lift to Rise, I think a couple months ago, to join and to come to one of our meetings just to provide an update. I think there's a lot that's been happening, or I know there's been a lot that's been happening, a lot of wins to celebrate for our region and to be excited for Lift to Rise. And so I've asked them to come and share out and and even to request any ask of the collective that they might have to support, their local regional housing work that's here. As as the collective looks to support all housing collective impact models and all housing in the region, we're excited to highlight Lift to Rise today. So thank you, Ian.
Thanks, Melanie. Hi, everybody. My name is Ian Gabriel. I'm the Director of Data Policy and Planning at Lift to Rise. You see a lot of familiar faces on the call. So it's nice to see everybody. I have a deck to share. We're going to give a little refresher on sort of what Lift to Rise does, and then zoom into our Housing Catalyst Fund, which is one of the initiatives that we work on, and give some more detail about some of the how it works and some of the success that we've had with that fund just so far, and then take a look at sort of where it's headed. And I'm also joined on the call by my colleagues, Melissa, Jessica, and Christy from Lift to Rise. So we're super happy to be here. Thanks for having us. So I'm going to share screen. Oops. Sorry. There we go. All right, so just to start us off, Lift to Rise is a nonprofit organization. We're based in Palm Desert in the Coachella Valley. We serve the entire Coachella Valley, and we operate towards this North Star of a future where all Coachella Valley families are healthy, stable, and thriving. We primarily work in the areas of affordable housing or housing stability and economic mobility. Obviously, those two things are very connected, but primarily what we do is serve as sort of a convener of what is known as the Housing Collaborative Action Network, or the Housing CAN, which is a similar kind of coalition to the Inland SoCal Housing Collective, but it's located and focused on the Coachella Valley specifically. So the Housing CAN is made up of over 60 cross-sector partners, and we're all organized around a central shared goal, which I'll share on the next slide. The folks that make up the Housing CAN include all 9 of the Coachella Valley cities. So we have elected officials, city staff members from different departments, mostly from planning, economic development type departments. We also, our lead institutional partner on the Housing CAN is Riverside County Department of Housing and Workforce Solutions, which oversees the housing authority at the County of Riverside. And Mike Walsh, who's the deputy director there, is the CAN's co-chair. It also includes residents of the Coachella Valley, community-based organizations. We have, I would say, about 10 or 12 affordable housing developers, mostly nonprofit, some for-profit, but all affordable developers that are part of the coalition. We have CDFIs and other funders. So it's really a cross-sector initiative, and that's sort of the key to the work that we do, is that we rely on sort of the shared and aligned contributions of all of these different sectors that have a stake in seeing more affordable housing getting built in the Coachella Valley. So the shared goal that I was referencing, we developed this goal collaboratively with the members of the Housing CAN in 2018, which was to reduce rent burden in the Coachella Valley by 30% through the production of 10,000 units of affordable housing by 2028. So we're about halfway through that time period at this point. And the way that we arrived at this goal was through a whole extended about a year-long process that involved dozens and dozens of community listening sessions with residents across the Coachella Valley to reveal sort of what kinds of interventions folks thought they needed to help them make ends meet, what kind of barriers they were facing that were impacting their housing stability and economic mobility. And we sort of, through this process and also through analyzing quantitative data on all kinds of policy metrics related to outcomes in the Coachella Valley, we sort of landed on this metric of rent burden, and that if we could move the number of households that are experiencing rent burden downwards, that would have a sort of a population level impact. And in order to get to that reduction in rent burden, we did some calculations that landed us technically at 9,881, but 10,000 units rounded up for to reach that level of rent burden reduction. So this is our goal, 10,000 units, and that's our clear result that everybody created together and is organized around and is moving towards, which I think is another important point, to have that specific goal established that everybody's working towards. So every 2 years, we engage in what's known as action planning, which is essentially our strategic planning that we engage all of our stakeholders in the housing can around. Every 2 years, we come up with a plan for how we're going to get to our 10-year goal, and we break it up into 2-year segments, recognizing that things change. You know, we couldn't have anticipated that COVID would have happened. There are shifts to the market, there are shifts in innovation and affordable housing development, there's political shifts locally at the state level, funding streams come and go. So we recognize the need to, about every 2 years, to revisit our priorities and our strategies on how we're going to get to our goal, but all in the service of that 10,000 unit result towards the end. So the most recent action planning is from action plan covers 2022 to 2024. You can see it on our website, and I'll post it in the chat as well. But essentially, the action plan covers 5 key strategy areas around which the housing can is working. So the first is aggregating a pipeline of affordable housing projects across the Coachella Valley. So this allows us to track development and map out new opportunities for development across the region and spot patterns across projects that are stalled in order to determine what intervention may be necessary to move those projects from a stalled state to actual construction. And that could be, you know, funding, intervention, policy, community engagement. There's a lot of different things that a project could need, but mapping out the pipeline allows us to see that. And then funding is the second strategy pillar. This really focuses on the Catalyst Fund, which I'll get into a little bit later on in the presentation. But essentially, we have a number of strategy actions that go into growing our Regional Housing Catalyst Fund, which leverages both public and private capital to deploy low interest flexible loans to affordable housing developers and catalyze units. The third strategy area is policy. So this is around advocating for policies at the city, local and city and county level, the state level and the federal level, that will help incentivize and facilitate more affordable housing production in our region specifically. So I know that the Inland SoCal Housing Collective has worked on a lot of the same kind of advocacy efforts, especially at the state level, that have to do with things like TCAC and SIDLAC scoring and how often the guidelines and regulations that impact the scoring of those projects maybe unintentionally make projects in our inland region less competitive for funding. So that's an example of some of the state level policy advocacy that we're working on, is trying to rewrite or alter the way that those programs are written so that our region gets its fair share of resources for affordable housing. The fourth strategy pillar is around resident engagement. So this is really important, and we have a whole resident engagement team at Live to Rise that works on educating and mobilizing residents and elected officials in our region in support of affordable housing. So this is hugely important because ultimately what we're doing is for the community and by the community, and it's really important that community members advocate on behalf of themselves for the housing options that they want to see. And so we have been able to organize what's called the Resident Leadership Table, which is it's a group that sort of operates in tandem with the CAN and participates in the CAN, but sort of operates on its own as well, of resident leaders that each have their own sort of base of residents that they can activate in different cities in support of proposed affordable housing projects, policies that are going before Planning Commission and City Council. And we also host things like Lift to Rise town halls, where we invite residents from the community to come in and learn about certain aspects of affordable housing development and finance, and trying to sort of bring people in so to make the process more clear and figure out ways that the community members can become involved in this process and help decide on the work that's being carried out. And then the last strategy is keeping residents housed. So I didn't mention, and some of you may know, during the pandemic, Lift to Rise and Inland SoCal United Way were the two nonprofits that Riverside County contracted to design and implement the Emergency Rental Assistance Program, which was a federal program that provided assistance to low-income renters who were falling behind on rent payments due to the economic fallout of the pandemic. And from that, it really laid bare sort of the need for ongoing tenant protections, and recognizing that we can't, while we're working on these long-term solutions to increase affordable housing supply, we also really need to focus on the short-term, housing crises that folks are going through, and making sure folks aren't getting evicted and can actually stay housed in the short term. So the fifth strategy area is around keeping residents housed, and by developing housing stability resources to prevent eviction and foreclosure. So those are our 5 main policy areas that are all in the action plan. And in the action plan, you could see more specific, detailed actions within these 5 areas. And this is sort of what our Housing Collaborative Action Network is all organized around. All right, so going into a little bit more detail on the pipeline, we maintain what's called the Affordable Housing Pipeline Portal. It's an online interactive mapping tool, which is also on our website, that lists out and maps all of the affordable housing that is potentially could get built or is underway already in the Coachella Valley. And we get the information from affordable housing developers, local cities, and part of what makes the CAN successful is that we've gotten to a point now where the different affordable developers that are involved in the group, they trust each other enough that they can share information about projects. They have good enough relationships now with the cities. Lift to Rise has facilitated relationships between the cities and the developers, so that there's much more of an information sharing kind of environment, as opposed to prior, before, when affordable housing developers are often a little bit more secretive or cagey about the information on their projects because of sort of the scarcity mindset around resources. So understandably so, but I think one of the great results of the way that we operate with the CAN is that now folks are much more likely to share out information and give us a bigger picture of sort of what's going on in terms of affordable housing across the region. So I encourage folks to check out the pipeline portal on our website as well. You can see information about all the different projects underway, details about who's the developer, how many units, who the target population is, what the site is, et cetera, et cetera. And Melissa, who's on the call, is our affordable housing pipeline manager who maintains this pipeline portal, and she can answer all the questions that you may have about certain projects in the pipeline. And another great aspect of this tool is that we have layers that you can overlay, things like the TCAC opportunity areas, things like the Sunline bus route. So it also allows, and also all of the sites inventories from the local jurisdiction's housing elements. So we can kind of map out what may be viable sites for future development using this tool. So right now we're at over 7,000 units in this pipeline at some stage of the development process. That's across 92 projects. We see that the average construction timeline for multifamily projects in the pipeline is upwards of 24 months. Sometimes it's creeping a little bit more now. And total development cost is over $2 billion. The pipeline contains both multifamily projects. It contains self-help, sweat equities, homeownership units, also contains Polanco and mobile home parks. So there's a variety of affordable housing typologies that are included in the pipeline, and there's also a range of affordability levels, but everything is affordable to 80% AMI or below. And then the units in the pipeline is what then predicates sort of the demand for loans out of the Coachella Valley Housing Catalyst Fund, or the We Lift Fund. So we didn't build a fund with a bunch of money and then find projects to fund. What we organized the demand for the loans first to determine how much money we would need to raise. So I have a brief video here that kind of explains some of the mechanics of the Catalyst Fund. Let me make sure.
We know the Coachella Valley, and we know the region has dozens of projects underway, but we need the right capital and partners to get them over the finish line. This is where We Lift can help. The We Lift Fund brings together investment capital from public sources, private funders, and nonprofit lenders called Community Development Financial Institutions. This structure is attractive to a broader range of investors, which means the Coachella Valley can attract more investment dollars into the community. Through the fund, local developers will have access to more affordable and flexible financing. That means more money stays in the valley and more local projects are funded. We Live's goal is to help projects get done faster, and that's important because we know there are thousands of families who are seeking more affordable housing. Think of the We Live Fund as a Swiss Army knife for financing affordable housing projects. Does a project need pre-development fund to get started? We Live can provide them. Is there a development that needs to finance on-site infrastructure? We Live can provide that too. Since it's a regional fund that can directly respond to the needs and wishes of the community, We Live will provide specific financing aid for our region's unique needs, like Polanco parks and early childhood and education infrastructure. More types of affordable housing stock in different parts of the valley means more choices. It means families won't have to choose between paying their rent or covering other expenses. It means more money in the family's pockets for food, medicine, and other necessities that will help them thrive. And we know thriving families means thriving communities.
So that's kind of like a brief overview of what the fund is. Essentially, it's a pool of money that we deploy in the form of low interest flexible loans to affordable housing developers, to projects that wouldn't get built otherwise. So the way the funding works is essentially Lift to Rise raises public and philanthropic capital, and then we partner with a couple of national CDFIs, the Low Income Investment Fund and RCAC, who match the capital that we raise dollar for dollar, and allows us to drive down interest rates on the loans. So essentially, the money that we raise from public sources is doubled by the CDF partners. So it's a really great leveraging tool. The fund is also a revolving loan fund. So the loans that we put out get repaid eventually after the loan term ends, and then we can recycle those funds to new projects. Another thing to mention is that there's a variety of different types of loans that the fund can support. So at this point, we've funded pre-development loans, we've funded acquisition loans, construction loans, and we're looking at other kinds of loan products as well that could help meet the unique needs of the projects in our region. So at this point, so yeah, basically this kind of goes over how the fund works, like the process, but the pipeline is the first step. From there, we can identify which projects actually need Housing Catalyst Fund dollars. The fund underwrites the loans through the leadership of Kenny Rogers, who's also on the call. He's our fund manager. He works for the Low Income Investment Fund, but he's housed at the Lift to Rise office. He's the fund manager, and so he underwrites the loans. the capital gets distributed to projects to catalyze development. The loans get paid back and then recycled into additional projects. So to date, with just through the Lift Horizon Low Income Investment Fund partnership, we've deployed $18 million total in loans to over 500, I think actually over 600 units catalyzed so far since 2021. We have, upwards of 2,000 units identified as ready for loans. We're just waiting on more money for the fund, but we have raised, we got a budget allocation via Assembly Member Eduardo Garcia for $15 million from the state budget. And then Riverside County contributed $2 million of its ARPA capital to the fund as well. And then we recently submitted an application to SCAG for $20 million from the REAP program, which explicitly named catalyst funds as an eligible use. So we've identified a lot of potential loans that could go out in our pipeline and are continuing to raise capital for the fund. Another important thing to mention, and I'm probably how am I on time, Melanie? Okay, cool. So the Community Advisory Committee, CAC, is a sort of an oversight body that is made up of community residents and other stakeholders with varying degrees of knowledge of the affordable housing finance landscape. But essentially, this group ensures that the loans that are being funded meet community priorities. So this is sort of an oversight group. They're not necessarily approving or denying each loan, but they're providing advice on sort of the strategic direction and of the fund, and ensuring that the loans that go out to projects fulfill what we call the 3 R's. So the first is rent burden, in that they are affordable projects, so affordable to at or below 80% AMI, that they're ready, so that there's, we know that they can absorb the loan, and thus if they get it, it will move the project forward. And then regional equity. So we're ensuring that projects get funded across the Coachella Valley as opposed to concentrated in certain areas, so that we can distribute more equitably across the geography. So that's sort of the high level overview of the Catalyst Fund. And I'm sure if folks have more questions about sort of the nitty gritty of how the loans work, the more technical aspects of the financing, we can connect offline. And volunteering Kenny for this as the fund manager, I'm happy to join as well, but we can answer more specific questions about how the loans actually work. But in terms of how folks can get involved, one thing would be to join the Housing Can, and a lot of folks on this call have already participated in Housing Can meetings in the past. We meet monthly. We actually had our monthly meeting this morning. But yeah, that will help. If you want to get involved, joining the Can will really help help you get a feel for what the collective is like, who's part of it, the kinds of things that we work on, and help inform sort of which projects we're focusing on and things like that. You could also attend our Lift to Rise town halls run by our resident engagement team. We also have our social media and our newsletter, which you could sign up for on our website. And then I think most importantly, I think a lot of the things that the members of this collective know to be true about sort of the San Bernardino Inland Empire region in general are the same things that we're experiencing in the Coachella Valley, in terms of the need for affordable housing, the understanding who it's for, why it's so important that we work on these issues. And so I think it's really important that folks just keep talking to your friends and family about this issue. I think there's a lot of misconceptions and a lot of things that people don't get about the need for affordable housing, or who it's for, why it's important. And I think the folks on this collaborative and the folks in the Can are all very passionate and knowledgeable about this issue. And so we encourage you to keep spreading the good word about the work that we do, and keep getting folks involved in this work as well. So I'm happy to take some questions. And also if any of my team members, Kenny, Jessica, Melissa, Christy had anything to add as well, please go ahead if I missed anything.
I know there was a question in the chat, Ian, about this work occurring in other regions of the Inland Empire.
So short answer is yes. We're kind of working on mapping out what it would look like to expand the pipeline and start tracking units across Riverside County, since our lead institutional partner is the county. They do have, information on a lot of deals that they've worked on in parts of Western County. So expanding outside of the Coachella Valley. A lot of the funding so far that has gone into the Catalyst Fund is specific to the Coachella Valley, and like the way that we had written the proposals. We identify specific sites in the Coachella Valley, but I think that this is a model that can be scaled up and replicated in other parts of the Inland Empire, especially starting in place-based settings. So one good example is Uplift San Bernardino, which I think Karen, she spoke last meeting, right? Yeah, so they're doing something similar in a place-based location in the city of San Bernardino. So I think there's applications elsewhere outside of the Coachella Valley where this could definitely work. Oh, it looks like Jessica answered already in the chat too. Thanks, Jessica.
Well, thank you, Ian. I appreciate, Lift to Rise and the team, and I see Jessica, Kenny, Melissa, and you, and appreciate the work you guys do and your expertise in this space too out in the Coachella Valley region. So thank you guys for presenting. We truly appreciate it. If you guys want to follow up with questions, please feel free. If you all want to put your information in the chat, or Ian, just please feel free to do so that way others can connect with you if they have any questions on how you guys do what you do. So thank you so much.
Thanks for having us.
Mm-hmm. And so next up we have, last but not least, we have Jessica Coria from the Federal Reserve and the Federal Reserve Bank of San Francisco. Sorry, and she's going to provide an update for us on. Well, I don't want to spoil it, but she's going to provide some updates on this in regards to CRA and some special reports, as we stated. So, Jessica, go ahead. Do I need to make you a co-host? Okay.
Mm-hmm. Hi, everybody. I don't have a ton of time, so I'm going to get going. Well, I get the capacity to. Oh, I got it. Share screen. Okay. All right, here we go. All right. Can everybody see that? Okay, perfect. All right. So CD updates. One thing before I do that, let me move this. Nope, this one over here, because I have a number of links to put in the chat, because a lot of the stuff I'm going to go over, you can talk about, or you can learn more about later. Okay, so what's our big updates in CD? First, obviously, let me start with my disclaimer. The views expressed are those of myself and not necessarily those of the Federal Reserve Bank of San Francisco or the Federal Reserve System. Moving on. One, we have a new mission. So one is promoting a sound and stable economy to support the lives of all Americans. So that's our new mission. And our CD team also has a new mission, which is advances economic resilience and mobility of low-income communities by addressing barriers to economic participation. And I think my main takeaway for y'all on this is just that we're continuing to do the work that we've been doing, at least since I joined for the past 3 years, but we're really focusing specifically on economic barriers, the barriers to economic participation, and we're really focusing on low-income communities. You know, I have the best region in the Fed because I have all of Southern California from Kern County to the San Diego border. And I think it'd be almost impossible to be doing this work and not, you know, be meeting our mission. So it's not necessarily true for some of my other colleagues that are maybe in other areas. So, and how we do this in CD, we do it through two main roles, right? So we have myself on the engagement side. And that's really where I'm trying to, you know, build together, help these types of partnerships that you put together through ISHC, through IECF, through what's going on in Lift to Rise in Coachella Valley. So anywhere that what I'm hoping to maybe do at some point with IE Go and Surf. So anytime there's this like a partnership that's coming together to work on these topics, I can be a resource to y'all for putting them together, the meetings, you know, paying for food if that's what needs to get paid for, bringing CRA bankers when we're ready to kind of start making a pitch about what kind of funding needs to happen to keep these things going. And also, I think one of the huge benefits of the Fed is that we are not in ourselves in competition with the funds. So we can be kind of a neutral advocate for our regions without being like, well, the reason I want you to give them the money is because we'd get a portion of it, for example. The other thing is we have the research side of our team. So I've had one of my colleagues, Lizzie, come and speak in the past about the changing geography of poverty in the Inland Empire. And she is so excited that y'all love her research. She's been able to present that in a couple things. She also did it at the Riverside CAP meeting. That she's going to continue to do research that's specific to the Inland Empire, so our MSA. So one of the things that I'm going to be working on next, I have an email, actually, I had the email open when Ian was talking to Heather. So I probably will be talking to you or Melissa at some point about multifamily home ownership. So it's not multifamily development, it's about different family members or people coming together outside of the traditional unit to build wealth through homeownership. So whether that means adding an ADU, so that can contribute to the mortgage, or if it's, you know, sisters going in on a place, for example, just they want to do a lot more work on that, because what we're finding, especially, well, in all of my region for sure, is that single family home is just not going to ever be attainable for the majority of our communities. Like I talked to Clemente and Jesse, and they were talking about how everything that comes out for this population, the middle population, it goes away, like the grants or the down payment assistance, it's gone within like a week of being up there. So clearly there's needs to be some other ideas behind how else can we work for people to build wealth in terms of homeownership. In addition to, obviously, affordable housing is super important as well. So we have these 4 priorities. Inclusive financial system, that's where like the bank on work lives. That's with access to credit and financial services for small businesses. And then we have our thriving labor force work, which is how we can help more people participate in the labor market and become mobile in that market, you know, not get stuck in a low paying, low quality job. And that's also where a lot of our caregiving work lies. And then we have our healthy and resilient communities work. This is very locally based. I think this is a lot where we can bring the workforce piece with the like surf work, because we know these local economies are going to continue to change in the future. You know, we're moving away from certain types of energy. We're moving into new types of energy. What does that mean for people who currently work on fixing cars all day? If they're only trained to work on gas cars, what does that mean for that population as we transition maybe to electrical vehicles? So really kind of trying to bring two things together and thinking at a like local, almost place-based area of what that community needs to be resilient in the future. And then lastly is this piece that we're making more formal now, but I have definitely reached out to many of you on this call in the past, which is when I asked my questions of how inflation is impacting the people that you work with, because this is relatively new territory for the Fed. Obviously, we're coming out of a global pandemic that no one had experienced before. And the way the recovery is happening is it doesn't show up in the data the way that they would like it to, or that they're able to understand. So what we're able to do is go out and ask people, like, why are there a bunch of job openings still? How are people being able to make ends meet given costs of inflation? And I maybe say the same thing every time, but it's important to say that over and over and over again, is that, people have gotten, one, a lot pickier during the pandemic. They've learned to live with less, and they've learned that the trade-offs that they were making to go to those low quality, low paying jobs just don't make sense for their families anymore in this post-pandemic world. So the more times we say that and help them understand what, the future labor force is really looking for, I think that can really help them understand why we continue to see such low unemployment and still increased in prices. We're still very much focused on closing gaps because we truly believe that's going to actually grow the economy as a whole. So we're going to continue to talk about all of our work as it relates to the economy. So if you had less wildfire smoke disrupting the Inland Empire, what is the economic output that we lost because of those increased days of smoke? That's just an example of the type of ways we talk about our data and research. It's always going to be tied back to the economy. And while we know there's a lot of other reasons that it benefits, we would want to reduce wildfire smoke, you're going to see us always be connecting it back to how this impacts the local economy. And then, why it supports our mission. We know that there are a lot of people that are not able to fully participate in the economy right now, and that is limiting our potential. And what we already know, especially in Southern California, is our future workforce is increasingly diverse. So the faster we understand how to remove those barriers for individuals and communities, the faster we're going to be able to actually see them live up to their potential. Real quick, we have our small business credit survey. All the data is available now online I have the link. I will drop it in the chat right after I'm done. What we, headline, basically everybody's still facing challenges. We know pandemic related government funding programs are ending. At the same time, some things are starting up, like the State Small Business Credit Initiative, which is a federal funding from Treasury that's going to go through the state. And we know that there's some, like, especially here locally, there's some in the Inland Empire, like with the, I'm going to mispronounce it, Karamversari project. Yeah, in Rivers, they're in Palm Springs, but they are giving out grants to small businesses, and they are going to continue to do that work. So we're lucky that, we're not like other places where once the PPP ended and once some of these other pandemic-related government funding programs ended. That basically meant it was it for small businesses in California. But we also know that a lot less applicants are being approved through traditional financing, and firms owned by people of color are less likely to be approved than white-owned firms, and that continues to be what we're seeing in the data. So as you can see here, our Black business owners are 20% of the applicants that were fully approved. That's a decrease of 14% from 2019 or before the pandemic. And you can tell it's much lower than the white applicants for small businesses. And this is for all credit, loan, line of credit, and cash advance. We are pretty close to maybe getting this information just for the Inland Empire MSA. We need to get to about 350 responses from small businesses. And we have like in the high 200s. So if we could just get a couple more maybe to fill this out. It's in English and Spanish. And I'm going to be working with Monica this year to make sure that gets out to her clients. But if you know anyone that might be interested in distributing this to small businesses, we're going to start the survey in the fall. And I think it'd be really exciting to get this just for the Inland Empire MSA. These are all links, so when you get the PowerPoint, you can go and look at it. But I just wanted to give you a little bit highlights of a couple things that have come down recently. One is the SFA Data Explorer. Every month, the economists in my econ research team update this with the monthly current population survey data, and it allows you to play a lot like with it, what's going on in the economy. You can break it down by different demographics, labor force participation. It's just a really neat tool, and I really want to encourage people to use it and tell me what other data they'd like to see in it, because I really want them to keep this going. It took them a lot of time and effort to put it together, and now I need to know how people are using it so we can make the case for them to keep it up beyond what they already put in there. So if you ever go on there and you think, oh, it'd be awesome to have this, I'd love to hear that. The second is we have another researcher besides Lizzie. Her name's Rocio Sanchez Moyano. She is a housing expert, and she recently did a paper on the digitalization of the housing search and whether or not that changed any barriers. So basically, has Redfin and Zillow and these other ways to look up who's selling, what's on the market, for how much, how has that changed any barriers to the housing search? Because, before maybe you had to hear from your realtor and you only got sent what they sent you or where they were willing to take you on a tour. So that's just something interesting maybe for y'all. I have 2 minutes left. I'm starting my timer. And the other two big things that have happened this year is in March of 2023, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau finalized the rules of Section 1071 of the Dodd-Frank Act. That is the easiest way to explain it. HMDA, which is the Home Mortgage Disclosure Act data, but for small businesses. So now we'll know who applied, who got denied, and we'll know that at a demographic level. And as a result, special purpose credit programs are kind of becoming all the rage. What those are basically are targeted lending products designed for a specific economic group, disadvantaged group. Typically because of ECOA, the Equal Credit Opportunity Act, you can't say, oh, I'm going to create a loan product just for Black-owned businesses or just for Black homeowners. Special purpose credit programs allow you to do that, and it's not against those regulations. So before, the housing one has always been there, and actually both of these programs were always available to, or for a long time they've been available to banks, but people are very nervous, and so only the bigger banks would do them, and then they didn't really promote them very well. It was kind of like a nice to have. If you knew about them, then maybe you knew who to ask. But like your random branch person might not know that it existed. We've seen a huge push in the other banks, regional, more small banks wanting to start these, and a lot more push on just promoting them because of what we've seen in both the HMDA data and what we assume we'll see in the 1071 data is that there are very clearly huge gaps of who is not getting access to these capital. So that's that. And then, oh, I don't think I have time for my questions, so I can skip those. But one last thing is that I was excited because I thought we would be able to be sharing at this time the update to modernization. Unfortunately, we are not there yet. We have not released the final rule. But if you want to learn more between now and then of what we think might be in the final rule, I'm going to put in two resources that I think. One is a video, so if you're more of a visual audio person, you can watch, and the other one's just a PowerPoint of the key changes, and hopefully I will be able to be presenting in the near future on the CRA rule and its potential impacts on community-based organizations. So I don't want to go over anymore, but thanks. And if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat or email me.
Thank you, Jessica. So much information. I know you were saying you're like, I don't need that much, but I think we could spend a lot more time with you too, just diving into especially the data also. So thank you for coming and sharing out. I mean, we'll look to have you come back real soon, hopefully, with a CRA update for the collective. And so this last 15 minutes of the meeting, I like to pivot and to just open this up to the pillar work that the collective does. So the collective operates between San Bernardino and Riverside County and strategizes across both these regions from these 4 pillars that we derived a couple of years back in 2018 and have done a lot of our strategizing from, a lot of our education around too. So we have 4 pillars, and so I have 2 of the pillar chairs that are on today, and I'll provide updates for the other 2, but I want to ask Ayako, I see you unmuted, so we'll have you go first. Ayako, to share our first pillar update for the expansion of housing solutions.
Thank you, Melanie. Great information today. Ayako Utsumi here with Mary Erickson, Community Housing. I'm Vice Chair of Inland SoCal Housing Collective, and I also had the expansion of housing solutions pillar. And we have one of our exciting news is that we have launched our collective outreach to the Inland Empire mortgage holding homeowner community to ensure that everyone has access to information about the state's mortgage assistance program. It's up to $80,000, that's $80,000 for any mortgage, property tax, reverse mortgage type of assistance per qualified home or mortgage holder. We have found that when it was first announced, the requirements were so restrictive that not enough people were qualifying. And then they changed the rules, but then people didn't start applying again. So collectively, we decided, why don't we use the considerable outreach power of the Inland SoCal Housing Collective to try to get the word out to more mortgage holders who may be at risk for any reason pertaining or as a result of the pandemic. So Lisa Ralph was on, let's see, Lisa, Rachel was on, there you are. So NPHS was the first to step up and said that they would hold their outreach initiative for this effort, and theirs was last Friday. And I'll let Lisa give us a very, very short 30-second update on how it went, and any information you might share with the other groups that are up next, who are NHSIE, credit.org, and some others. We do plan to go to all parts of the IE, including high desert, low desert, Coachella Valley out east, to make sure that everyone has access to this education. So Lisa, give us a brief update on how it went last Friday.
Yes, so we had, I believe, 7 people who actually registered. Out of those 7, 4 showed up and we were able to assist them all. We are following up with the others, but we've also had an uptick in inquiries and phone calls to our office. So people are, maybe they couldn't come out, but they are inquiring about the program. In talking with a lot of the clients, a lot of them are still in a forbearance or still coming out of it. So I feel like we're really not going to see a wave until maybe coming towards the end of the year.
Okay.
That's my prediction. But people are receiving the help. We just got word, I believe at the beginning of the week, that someone that we submitted application for just got their approval letter. So we were happy to hear that.
Excellent.
And you know, the funds are there. I think it's just getting the word out. So we are continuing to market it, put it on our newsletter, put it on our website, and just get the word out.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Lisa, especially for going first. We appreciate it.
Not a problem.
And again, all the organizations that are on this call, please do think about forwarding our newsletter, that the one that Melanie puts out. Is it weekly, by once a month? Okay. And please forward that out to your respective email networks, because there is someone out there with a mortgage who income qualifies and doesn't realize that there's up to $80,000 in mortgage assistance of some kind, even property taxes, reverse mortgages, etc. So please put that word out. There's money there. We want people to know. Please help us get the word out. So thanks for that. Melanie, when will the next newsletter come out so people can have access to forwarding that information? Or you can go and use the one last,
Yeah, so we had one go out Tuesday at like 6:15, 6:20 a.m.
Okay.
So the next one will be August 1st. Sorry, September 1st.
September 1st.
Will be the next. So it's every 2 weeks.
Yeah, great. So Janice Williams says, is there a flyer? Yes, there is.
Yeah.
And Mel, would you kindly put in the link to the flyer as well as the link to the survey? So the
registration,
yes, excuse me, the registration to attend one of these sessions. And we do that so that people, so we reduce the amount of frustration with, oh, I did all this work and I don't qualify. It's just something that helps the mortgage holder as well as the company, whatever organization is helping them, to screen people out in a more timely manner, so that so each side doesn't spend unnecessary time when we find that they actually don't qualify. So yes, thank you for that, Melanie. Appreciate that. And again, please do put the word out. There is mortgage assistance out there from the state of California.
And I just to add one more piece in terms of a flyer, our website's probably the best because we'll have updated information. We had a flyer for this most recent event that just passed on Friday, which was focused on like Rancho, Ontario, those where NPHS like exists, their physical office. So our next event date, we won't release, but we have a couple of HUD certified counseling agencies in our region that are just trying to lock down a date sometime in September or the first part of October where it'll be a similar thing. So my best advice is to just check the newsletters and to look back at our website, because we'll have, as new dates come forward in this series, it'll be updated on the website also.
Great. Thanks, Mel. And that concludes our report. Thank you. Oh, and we meet on the the second Thursday of every month at 9 a.m. Second Thursday every month, 9 a.m. Our committee meets. We focus, right now we're focusing on the home mortgages, but we also focus on connecting our respective organizations in order to apply for more affordable housing applications, all the different NOFAs out there, getting connected. If your organization is not vertically integrated to develop permanent supportive housing, this is an opportunity for you all to network so that you can put together more competitive applications. So we're also, we have done that. We're also working on potential homelessness solutions and innovative housing construction alternatives as well. Thank you.
All right, next up, we'll have our Educate and Advocate for Public Policy. So we have Alan Greenlee who will provide an update for us on this pillar work.
Perfect. Thanks, Melanie. It's always hard to go after Ayako. She keeps a full plate. Well done. So the Educate and Advocate pillar is really our kind of advocacy group. It's our committee that works on advocacy. I am happy to report. I just dropped into the chat, the section on the Inland SoCal Housing Collective website where we keep track of the legislative items that we take a position on. There's been some extraordinary work by the staff, Melanie, and some additional support that she's been working with to develop a template, a rubric by which we evaluate legislation, and the template is really designed on the design is informed by the decision-making requirements that we include there in the website. So if you go to the site, you can see sort of the general concepts around how we consider public policy measures. So for example, we think about whether the legislation would have a positive impact on the creation and or the preservation of affordable housing units in the Inland Empire. So there's a series of categories that we use to make an evaluation of a piece of legislation that we want to take a position on. It allows an opportunity for continued great staff work to evaluate pieces of potential legislation, consider them, and then brings to the committee, brings to the pillar this template, which gives us a quick, easy way to review and consider the legislation. I'm happy to say that if you look again, you look at the link there, you can see that we've taken a position on something like 14 bills, which is a high watermark for our organization. And the really great news is that happens. It's enabled in two ways. One is through the thoughtful consideration that is sort of embedded in that template, and then a review and discussion by members of the pillar. If you're enthusiastic about those opportunities, I'll just say that we meet on the first Tuesday of every month at 10 o'clock, and you guys are welcome to attend.
Thank you, Alan. Again, I just put it in the chat, but I just wanted to give a shout out to Elizabeth, our intern, our MSW intern from CBU. She's been helping this whole summer and has just helped advance and amplify our work greatly. And so I just wanted to say thank you to Elizabeth. She will be completing her internship next week. So we're excited for her to try something new, to move on. And the collective will be hosting another intern starting September 1st. So, but lastly, let's see here. I just want to, the one announcement that I have for our Bank on Coalition for our wealth building and preservation pillar is what is in regards to the Bank on workshop next week on Tuesday at 10. It's just a mini workshop just to help those colleagues, staff members, that might want to learn a little bit about it, a 30-minute workshop on what it is and how they can get involved and plugged in. So I will forward that on. It's also in the newsletter. So if you guys have anything else to add, or any comments or any announcements, please feel free to just drop them in the chat and people can grab them there. But we only have a minute left, so I wasn't able to open it to everyone at this point. So I'm sorry for that, but thank you everyone for coming. I appreciate it. Great turnout for August, and everyone's coming back from summer. So I appreciate all your participation. And thank you to all the presenters who shared all this helpful information for our region. Thank you.
Thank you, Mel. Great work.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Great work. Thank you so
Thanks,
much.
take care.
Thank you.